But with that said, yeah, to answer your question, what does Rowdy Kelly do? Yeah, he does like I think he dabbles in like obviously like drone footage stuff, and then he also does like I think he's like a location manage or a location scout, which is I don't know if you know what that is.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Do
okay.
you wanna explain what it is for people that don't know?
Yeah, yeah. So basically, it's someone who goes out and like scouts locations for future film shoots. It's pretty much self-explanatory, but that is the more of an expanded definition of it. And they go out and yeah, just kind of take inventory of the area and see if it's adequate for filming.
The
But
drones, that's a realm I have yet to dive into. I was talking to Andy about it because he just got another drone, and I've been for the past few weeks, I'm looking at them and I'm trying to justify why I would need one, and then I realized I really don't need one because the bar of entry is pretty high still for drone tech. For a decent drone like a DJI that you're actually gonna shoot some good footage on, I mean, you could drop $1,000.
right,
Like, "Yep, this is just what you're gonna pay." But the footage is incredible. I mean, your shots that you guys included was great footage of Eureka.
yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, it was. I mean, I just got to credit the drone videographers, I guess, and they're a lot. Some of it comes down to a lot of actually a good at least half of it, if not more, came down to their what they wanted to get, like what they thought was best. Because I mean, we were we were kind of relying on them more or less to kind of guide us as to what kinds of footage they think. Like we had like a foundation for what exactly we wanted, but like as for like specific locations, that's where they came in handy. If that makes sense.
Yeah, so they more lined you guys up with, "Oh, this shot of this part of town would
Hmm.
be best to
Yeah.
open the scene or to close out this particular segment."
Yeah.
So, how did you for people that don't know, you were from the Homeless in Humboldt project. You were the director for that project.
Yes.
How did that idea come into fruition?
So basically, yeah, so it's an interesting kind of collisions of worlds or yeah, kind of culmination of things. So basically, it's a long-winded answer. I don't know if you care for the long-winded answer or if you would like the shortened down version. I'll just try to make it concise or try to balance it out. But so I had been hired on as an intern by the what was then called the Humboldt State. I don't know if you know, but Humboldt State is now called Cal Poly Humboldt. Um,
Yeah, still trying to get used to that change.
yeah, yeah, sure, a lot of us are, um, but yeah, there's something I think it's still ongoing. I don't know. I have not checked into it in a while. Called the, um, and of course I'm blanking on the name on Spotlight. It's it's basically something that it's like Humboldt in the Time of COVID archive project, and or something along those lines. That's the name of it. And what it is so the idea is that so you know how we were looking back 100 years in the past at the Spanish flu of what was it 1914, 18 or something like that, and seeing how people survived during that time. Um, well, the the idea with this COVID archive project was that I, as an intern, were I was going to be working in conjunction with the Humboldt State Library to gather, to aggregate community submissions, whether it be poems, art pieces, music, photos, videos, whatever, of just showing how Humboldt was and is surviving in the time of COVID, so that researchers 100 years into the future could look back at us and see how we were surviving, just like we were looking 100 years in the past, if that makes sense. And so I was going to do it. And I was really excited, and but unfortunately, they ran out of budget for us to hire interns, and they're like, "Hey, it's like, maybe we can check back in the future, but for now, no, we can't hire you on." And that was kind of deflating to me, as it would be for anyone. But for what that was worth, I did that did spark an interest in me in wanting to do some kind of art project related to Humboldt in the time of COVID, regardless of if I was going to be attached to that, the thing with the library or not. Um, but then the other thing that came into play was there was this grant, excuse me, that was I wanted to get, and I was informed by by my, faculty advisor at the time, Vicky Sama, about this grant, which was, I think it was the California Humanities Grant or something that would be it was, supposed to be showcasing, the humanities basically through video. And, I was interested in that, and so I didn't really have an idea of what I wanted to do for it. I just know I wanted to apply for the grant. So, I tried, I assembled a team. I got them going with that, and we didn't get the grant. It's not we didn't get the grant, it's that it was just too much, like, overhead, too much work, because I may or may not know, applying for a grant is a lot of work.
I can imagine.
Yeah, and just a lot of hoops to jump through, and ultimately, it just didn't really work out. However, I had a team, and, I had a I had this, like, drive to wanna do something, about Humboldt in the time of COVID, and so, basically, I wanted to yeah, so I now let me backtrack a little bit. The team didn't, um spawned all from the grant. I I kind of was, like, talking to people here and there, but the team actually, like, legitimately formed when, we started doing the actual documentary series. Now I gotta credit my, colleague Skylar Gavin, who is now a you might have seen her as a reporter on, Redwood News. She came up with the idea of doing something about homelessness in the time of COVID, as a project. And yeah, so literally how that got started was that, and I know, sorry, it's a long-winded answer, but me and her were walking back from a separate shoot. Me and her were both involved in video production for I think for the lumberjack, and we were walking back from like I think it was called the Angels of Hope thrift store in Arcata, and, it's a thrift store in, like, the Creamery District in Arcata, and, she or we happen I happened to notice a homeless man, who had been the subject of a separate documentary, that I had watched before. I'm like, "Hey, I recognize that guy." I just started chatting him up, and, Skylar, that's kinda what I guess would spawn the idea in Skylar's mind, like, "Hey, maybe we could do something about" because I had already been talking to her about, "Hey, I've got this grant, I've got all these other things going on, I don't really know the state of them, let's see what we can make happen." And, yeah, so I really gotta credit Skylar Gavin for, coming up with the actual idea of doing homelessness in the time of COVID, but I already had kind of a foundation, but she really elevated it.
You had the general idea of, "I wanna do something in this realm," and she
Mhm.
kinda put that last piece in there.
Yeah, really just like the cherry on top, kinda like the homelessness aspect to it. And we hadn't looked back,
And so no grant money, you just decide at this point you wanna do it out of pocket,
mhm, yeah.
so you were committed.
Yeah, and, I got a team that was with me for about, a year and a half, 2 years. I graduated a year before, they graduated, or some of the team graduated. And that actually kinda worked in my favor because, I was still, you know I was a student until May of 2021. Um, but my other colleagues, they graduated most of them graduated either a half a semester or a full semester after I graduated, so I had time. They were still in Humboldt, they still had motivation to continue to work on this project, and, they were still here, and they had incentive as they were, um, also taking I should mention sorry, kinda jumping around, but I also, part of this project, and I don't this is probably something you don't know, is that, we were, um doing this was part of a part of an internship class kind of a thing. It was called mass media internship. And our advisor, Vicky Sama, who I just gotta hand it to her, time after time, she really helped, kinda guide us through this. And, yeah, so that was I mean, yeah, I would think if you were taking a class that you needed to do well in, you would have incentive to wanna do this project, but it would also went beyond that. They actually had there was, like, a humanitarian side to it. Um, so, yeah.
Was the class structured in a video format where you had to film something and produce that?
Yeah, yeah, pretty much like a deliverable or something like that, almost like to a client, and,
Is that how you found the rest of your team? Was everyone was in that class?
um, not really, no, it's a good question because, I kind of learned yeah, I mean, I was already aware of my other colleagues, like, we were all journalism majors, but I just, actually, Rachel Marty, who was also a reporter at Redwood News in Eureka, yeah, here in Eureka, um, she, she was basically someone who was also, interested in the COVID-19 archive project. Same situation as me. She was going to be an intern. She never got to be an intern because of budget shortfalls. So I that was so yes, actually, I take that back. One of the people I did find through the internship class because Vicky Sama connected me with Rachel. I didn't know Rachel. I knew Rachel. I knew of Rachel. I just didn't know that Rachel was also interested in doing something similar to what I was doing in terms of, a creative project like that. But Skylar, I already mentioned how I got in contact with her. And then Valentina, I had met through a video production class, not the internship class, but through a different video production class. And I was already in contact with her. So I just, things kind of worked out. The stars aligned. And, there we were. So,
And so, starting from the beginning, your first intro into the documentary was about JP and his wife. How did you find them? So the focal point of your story is you're following a homeless person through this time in COVID and kind of unraveling their story. And your initial story was with JP and his wife. Did you already know of JP? Did you just happen to find him and think, "Oh, this guy would be interesting to put on?"
yeah. So it's an interesting question because, we, I so how this is luckily this is not as long-winded as the story as the other one, but, I had made a Facebook post in a group, and I believe her name was Brittany Powell or something like that. She's the public information officer for the Eureka Police Department. She saw my post because I made what I did in the infancy stages of this, documentary series is I made, posts all over social media and Craigslist for that matter, and I'll get to that in
Oh, that's a sketchy site.
but it actually turned out to work out, and we'll talk about that. Um, but I did make posts on Facebook, and I'll just like seeing if anyone wanted to help either as crew or shall I say cast or as like the subjects of my documentary. And Brittany Powell said she reached out to me and she said, "Yeah, hey, maybe this Sergeant LaFrance at the Eureka City or yeah, let me see my words. The Eureka's the city the police department at the city of
EPD.
Eureka, EBD, yeah. And she said that he might be interested in being interviewed for my documentary. So I got thinking, I'm like, okay, maybe I can interview this guy. And I will give you context. He runs a program called CSET. And actually, you probably saw that in the JP episode. And for those who don't know, it stands for the um, Community Safety Enhancement Team. They're a subdivision of the Eureka Police Department that focuses on homeless outreach. And, as you can imagine, that
Lend itself
yeah,
to
lend
what
its
you're trying to do.
exactly, yeah, and so, I reached out to him, we got talking, I actually was able to interview him, um, and, while that footage didn't necessarily make it into the final cut, um, it did lend itself speaking of lending itself to, the next stage of trying to find JP, which was, um, he got me in contact with a now retired, police officer in the same department called, what's his name? His name is
Dennis
Dennis
Gagmon?
Gagma. Yes, that's right. Can't believe I forgot that. But, it's just a lot of names out there. But, he basically introduced me to JP. That's how I got in contact with JP. He took me around. He's like, "Hey, maybe I can take you guys on a tour around, like just the Eureka area and show you like, various homeless individuals who, maybe interested in being interviewed for your documentary, and, one of the first people we came across was JP, who was then with his wife, who was with his then wife, Katie Jo, and that's how we found JP.
Did you know as soon as you met him that he was the one, or did you try out a couple others that didn't really pan out?
Kinda both, honestly. JP was I mean, he was already, like, being, shall I say, marketed or advertised by Gagnon, as being someone who was, like, really, like, well-spoken and, like, just, like, really kind individual. Um,
Isn't gonna spaz out on you guys or
yeah, yeah, but yes, we did also try interviewing other, homeless individuals, and I mean, while we got their stories, it was cool to hear their stories. We didn't end up going with them as our main, subject for our documentary.
was it just the quality of the footage in the sense that some of them couldn't really speak or maybe weren't in the right mind to speak?
Yeah,
'Cause, I mean, you're dealing with a difficult demographic to try to pull information out of, in the sense
right.
of what you would need for your documentary. You need somebody that's open, that's willing to talk about what they're going through, and most people, when they're down on their luck, aren't really inclined to say, "Yeah, sure, put a camera on me and I'll
Well, the
just
thing
spill my heart out."
Yeah, well, the thing with JP was that he was already kind of not necessarily outspoken, but he was definitely like more extroverted. Now, if JP was in this room right now, he would tell you the same thing he's told me and every other person that's wanted to that wanted to interview him, that he was admittedly a little closed off. Even JP was closed off. I mean, JP's a relatively outgoing person and pretty open about things, but even he was a little closed off, like kind of guarded, a little standoffish because he didn't trust us, in his own words, when we first interacted with him. But yes, I think it was more about the fact that he was, like you said, willing to talk to us, and he was in a relatively good headspace compared to some of the other people. And not saying more stable, just yeah, just all the other aforementioned things. So yeah.
And so you get rolling with him. Did it take a while to build that rapport to where he really let you in? Or did you guys were you able to start using footage from the first day you filmed with him?
Yeah, I literally from the first day we filmed with him, you may recall there was like I think it was an on the ground shot of him pulling his wagon, and there were like some other guys walking around with him. That was on the first day of shooting, or one of the first days of shooting. I think it was on the first day of shooting. Um, and yeah, pretty much right off the bat, we were able to get footage with him, and it just got better and better.
And so part 1, I know you were filming him from September 2020 to May 2022?
Yeah, so let me think. So I think it started more in yeah, it started around like September, October. I don't remember the exact date. And then yeah, May of 2022 was when it ended. Yeah.
And so how much time was dedicated to each part? Because you have a part 1 with him and then a part 2 follow-up.
Right. So part 1, I mean, part 1, I don't know how much you would like me to talk about part 1, but
You can
it
talk about it as much as you want, yeah.
okay.
That's what we're here to do is talk about this.
Okay, cool, for sure. I just did well, I don't necessarily wanna spoil everything, but I'll try to be
Leave a little
concise.
something so that they're
Yeah, yeah,
enticed.
yeah, yeah. So part 1, for those who don't know, deals with JP and his wife, Katie Jo, as they are struggling to make, you know, ends meet or whatever out of a, tent in the Devil's Playground. And for those who don't know, you may not even know, Devil's Playground is a area behind the Eureka Mall, behind the Bayshore Mall, that is. And it had a large homeless encampment of, I think, several hundred people, that actually got disbanded, and, but it's still called Devil's Playground. He was living behind there, and we were documenting his life as he was going through, the trials and tribulations of being out of a tent with a wife, no less, and who was struggling with things herself, both physically and mentally, along with JP. And yeah, so um, your question was
The length of filming
the
with him,
length
because
of
it seems like
filming.
you guys followed him for a while.
Right. So our length of filming with him was throughout the course of a few months. We filmed part 1, and then we filmed part 2. We were kinda just filming as we went along, so it was kinda just like a natural progression. So part 1, I think, ended, like I said, it was a few months. I don't think it was more than, several months, but it definitely wasn't a year, I can tell you that. I could be wrong on those dates, so don't necessarily quote me on that, but I know it wasn't. I mean, like I said, the main point to take away from this is that we were just filming, the part 1 kinda carried into part 2. We were filming just as we went along. We didn't want to, and I wanna make this point. We weren't wanting to kind of insert ourselves in the documentary. While you did see that in part 2, like a cameo of me from the back, just like nodding. You may remember that when then Nikki or and then she says, "I can follow that with JP." You probably recall that. Um, and yeah, we didn't really want to insert ourselves. We kind of just wanted to like let things happen. We
You
kind of
take a very passive role in that first one,
we
where you
do.
guys are really just letting his story unfold from his perspective.
Right.
And then the second one, you do kind of, and even when you do step in, it's you guys aren't even really directing where that goes. You're kind of just in a couple shots,
Hmm.
and then it goes back to him.
Yeah, yeah. We
That was all intentional.
That was all intentional. Yes. A phrase that Valentina, well, she taught me. I'd never heard it before, but I have honored it ever since, is, fly on the wall. And that basically, for those who don't know, means, like you said, taking a very backseat, kind of a passive approach to things. And, um, yeah, just basically not inserting ourselves too much, if at all, very minimally, into, their story, because we don't wanna alter their story. We want their story to be told organically. And so that is something that we really wanted to honor and carry out throughout this entire process.
Did you have a story plan for how you wanted the documentary to unfold, or that really just lined up with how he told his story?
Like I said, it was just kinda how things happen. I mean, we kinda just let things, happen in front of our eyes. I mean, with this kind of work, you can't really, like, it's not like a narrative. I mean, or it's not like like a three-act structure. It's not like,
Somebody's not writing this out and
yeah,
saying,
someone's not
"Okay,
writing this out.
you need to cry on cue here and do this, and then we're gonna go over here and shoot you being upset because this happened."
Yeah.
It's the guy's life.
It's the guy's life, and we were just there to capture it. We were just there to just to explore what his life was like. And sure, we asked him questions. Sure, we asked him to stand here for an interview, but, we didn't really, yeah, like I said, we really were not trying to manipulate the story.
And so, when you finish part 1, did you intend to follow up for part 2?
Yeah. So part 1 leaves JP, I guess it's kinda hard not to talk about it. Kinda riding well, yeah, he rides away on a bicycle. He says, "I'm trying to make the best life for my wife and myself." Part 2 picks up where part 1 left off.
He's
Part
still in limbo, still homeless,
Still homeless.
still in the same spot.
Yeah, and part 2, I will talk a little less about, because I think, I want kind of the audience to watch it, of course. But, Uh, I basically, to generally talk about it, it shows, yes, they are still homeless, JP, but he finds a new living situation. He finds a new life with a new family, and he just that's kind of the general gist of it. And but yes, part 2, it just goes right into part 2.
It's a pretty abrupt change because
It
part
is.
1, he's pretty solid with his wife. There's a point where they're talking about how I think it was his wife saying, "I'm surprised that he has stuck with me through this and vice versa for me as well." Cut to part 2, he's with a new girl. He's got a new girlfriend who has a kid. They're living up in Trinidad, or he starts out living in Eureka and then it ends up in Trinidad,
Yes.
and she's pretty much out of the picture. I
Right.
remember seeing that and thinking, "Oh, wow, okay, we just did a 180 from where they were," which seemed to be in a shitty spot.
Mm,
You're homeless, but at least you're kind of together and you're going through this and you've got each other's backs, and then bam,
mm.
complete 180.
And I can follow up on that and say JP is in what is called packed housing now. And I actually, um, that's that's the update since I'm sure that maybe that was one of your questions, is, what's the update since part 2? He Yeah, he's gotten into a stable situation through my help. I connected him with a person named Casey Crabb through Redwood Community Action Agency, and she helped him get um, into housing. And hopefully he gets into the Danco housing that was just built in, Arcata Valley West. They converted, maybe you heard about those
Yeah, the
hotels.
development they did.
Yeah, yeah.
Is he still with the girlfriend?
Yeah, they're all still together. And maybe you recall hearing in, part 2, he talks a lot about how much they mean to him and how much they've saved him, how much of a family they are to him. And that seems to be still holding true to today. They just came back from some rehab in, Reading. They were forced to, but they ended up benefiting going from, being, doing what they were doing to being clean and sober now. Um, and so, yeah, like speaking of 180s, man, their life is it just keeps getting better.
And how did he become homeless?
He became homeless through, that was something you probably noticed us admitting.
Yeah, I
Uh,
was wondering if that was deliberate or
that
if there was
was,
some circumstance that you guys didn't really wanna
well,
talk about in that.
not necessarily. It was just we just didn't feel like it really added. We really wanted to just talk more about his current life and like what are his current struggles. His past was that he was and this had made it up until the final cut. I mean, we really were going back and forth about whether we wanted to include this or not. Um, and he started off. He's always been like, in construction, doing modular home stuff. Um, and he ran a construction company here in, Humboldt in Eureka, I believe. And that kinda fell apart. He actually was doing well with, I don't remember if this was included in part 1 or not, but he did mention in at least one of the earlier cuts before the final cut of part 1 that he was doing really well, for a while with Katie Jo. But he did talk about how he met Katie Jo, but he didn't I don't exactly remember. I would need to go back
I
and
think
look.
that was included, that he was making some money,
Yeah,
they
he
were doing
was.
okay, it was just a part of where things turned.
Right. So, I think that kinda there was, like, some I don't remember the exact story, but I think there was, like, some it was a complicated situation, but, there was, like, some violence, being accused of stuff he didn't do or whatever. I don't remember exactly, but, it was there was a lot of moving parts. So I think we also admittedly did decide to, ultimately omit it because there was just so complicated and we felt like it took away from, what we really wanted to convey. So, yeah, sorry if that's not
No,
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah,
It's I mean, that seems to be the standard for most people that end up homeless, is it's a series of events that gets them wherever they are. It's
series.
not, "Oh, you just wake up tomorrow and you're homeless." It's, "Oh, my wife left me and took everything," or, "Oh, I started using drugs, and then this happened, and then this happened," and then you wake up and you
Well,
are homeless.
yeah, yes and no. Yes, and also no, because, I think something I really wanna get across is that homelessness can happen to anyone. You can wake up to, the next day and be homeless because maybe your house burned down or maybe because there's a lot of people who have come here. Something I've learned through the interactions I've had with the homeless advocacy community and the homeless people themselves. Um, Although I will say something I do want to mention is that I know that a lot of people out there do appreciate the term houseless, but um, I just use those terms interchangeably. So I'm just saying homeless for now. I hope that's
I
okay.
stick with homeless, yeah.
Yeah,
When they start trying to add new words to replace other words, it's like, "Guys, let's just say homeless."
yeah.
We all know what we're talking about.
It also rolls off the tongue, homeless and humble. Yeah, is that so something I was learning, through my interactions with the community around Humboldt, both the housed and unhoused community, is that, yeah, a lot of people have actually come to Humboldt because of the fires that were happening in Paradise and, in the more of the inland areas. So yes, anyone can become homeless, but, more often than not, it does the yes response to your question is that yes, more often than not, people do become homeless, because of drugs, mental illness, but there's also all these other, factors that are not talked about enough. And, yeah.
That can happen because of no fault of your own.
Yeah, exactly.
Your house just catches on fire.
Yeah, exactly, or, lightning strikes your house and it catches on fire or, there was a wildfire or whatever, and or, you got a familial situation. I mean, there's just so many reasons, and I don't want people to box themselves in to believing that there's solely, you know, the number of reasons that you can count on a hand is the number of reasons that one becomes homeless. I mean, it's seemingly endless.
Was that the biggest surprise, would you say, throughout filming this documentary, was just realizing the diversity of people that fall into that? Or did you have something that stuck out to you and you realized, "Oh, I never thought about homelessness in this way"?
Sure, yeah. So that was one of the Sure, yeah, certainly that was one of the biggest things. I think the stories, just the individual stories that were being told, not necessarily just JP's story or Angela Williams' story, but also, just like just how I think it's more about just like how amazing and special these people are. Because something that I think we were doing was that I don't think I know that we were doing was that we were one of the few groups of students during the pandemic who were actually going out and doing in-person things. While everybody was quarantining and, you know, hiding in their rooms and, doing online classes, our class was out there. We were interacting with a vulnerable population to begin with. Um, and, so to your question, we are yeah, so we were going around and just really talking to these people and sitting down and actually not walking by them, but actually, like, stopping and talking to them, and we learned these stories, and they have blown me away every time, and that's, I think, the biggest surprise for me is that, um, I guess I guess you could say I humbled myself in Humboldt. But, I learned yeah, that would be my biggest surprise that just, like, the extent to which their stories run deep and how, like, intertwined of a community they are. So, yeah.
Were you guys ever afraid going into some of these areas or dealing with some of these people?
Yeah, so we have had some shady interactions, like people following us around. The worst it's gotten, we have never gotten physically attacked. It came close. There was a man who was following us around. This was down by Free Meal in the area right by the co-op. He was following us around and like cussing at us and like I mean he was like bug-eyed. He was definitely not in a good frame of mind, to say the least. And so we luckily have avoided physical like altercations, but we have definitely had people shout at us and cuss us out or whatever. So yes, I would say free meal has always been an interesting place to go, but that's usually in my experience, I look, there's probably other areas in Humboldt that are either worse or that may not be spoken about enough that also are, bad in their own right. But from what we gathered, free meal was generally the most shady place.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I mean, vulnerable population, but also sketchy and unpredictable population at times.
absolutely,
And you guys are
absolutely.
going right into the
Think of it.
beehive.
Yeah,
And I
exactly.
hope I hope we make it out okay.
Yeah.
But you guys, that's good you guys never had any violent altercations. I think everyone can think of a circumstance where you see that homeless guy running down the street screaming,
Mm,
and I don't think most people's inclination is, "Yeah, I'm gonna go talk to this guy.
yeah.
I wanna get his story out."
There was actually an article, and I can if I find the link, I can forward it to you via email, about I'm sure you heard about the homeless woman who died in front of City Hall in Arcata, or maybe not.
I don't know if I heard about that.
Yeah, she was found dead in front of City Hall in Arcata. There was a story, I think it was Kim Kemp or some other local publication wrote a story about her, about how she was yeah, about her story. I have not read the story, but I just wanted to bring that up because that was kind of related to our current discussion.
Well, you have to think most people who are homeless, you're never gonna hear their story, and yet the story of homelessness is something that's touted all the time. I mean,
Mhm.
people can't shut up about homelessness, myself included, because it's such a big issue and it doesn't feel like people really deal with it.
Right.
But under that umbrella are thousands of individual stories,
Mhm.
and you don't get to see that. That's what's unique about your guys' project is you followed one guy, and on top of him just being homeless, it was in that COVID frame of this
Right.
is the state of the world that we're in, and you're also dealing with lack of resources.
So something I should mention is that we also so our initial thing was that we wanted to look at how homelessness and COVID went hand in hand, how they affected one another. And um while they do have some correlation, they don't have as much correlation as we thought or we were otherwise trying to make it out to be. Um
That's a big realization when you're watching your documentary,
yeah,
is the gap between life under COVID and homelessness, there wasn't really it didn't seem like it changed. It seemed like you're still homeless and it's just your day to day, but now you have a bandana that you have to wear as a mask.
exactly. Yeah. I mean, certainly to say that of course COVID affected homelessness to an extent like you said. But, like, people lost their jobs due to COVID or, this and that. But ultimately, yeah, like you said, there's just so many other things to factor in when you're homeless. I mean, COVID, and that would be another thing that would surprise me. But also was kind of sobering to learn that, um, yeah, I mean, when you're homeless, COVID is one of the last things on your mind.
It's not a big problem.
It's not, yeah, when you have to think about where you're gonna sleep at night, where you're gonna get social services, where you're gonna get food, drinks, where you're gonna use the bathroom, um, where you're gonna be able to maybe do some semblance of laundry, if that's even an option for you. Um, but yeah, it's yeah, so that would be my answer.
You were pretty surprised by that. Did
I
you guys
was
think it was gonna be a bombshell? Like, "Oh, you're homeless, it's super hard, and then now you have COVID and it's just 10 times harder."
we did admittedly think that, that did cross my mind a couple times, but I don't know if it was to that degree, but we certainly thought there was gonna be more of a correlation than there actually turned out to be. So yeah, it wasn't as, like, drastic as that, but yeah, it was, like I said, we were wanting to do it one way, but we humbled ourselves and through we didn't learn, like, through research, we learned through, like, talking to the people.
Being on the
Yeah,
ground,
being on the ground, boots on the ground, like, talking to these people, learning, and not just, like, turning a blind eye,
which is what a lot of people do.
which is what a lot of people do.
Well, it's easier to just ignore the problem.
It
Say,
is.
"Yeah, I'm just gonna not go down by the co-op. I'm just gonna stay off these sketchy parts of Broadway." I mean,
Mm.
how many people go to Devil's Playground that
Uh,
aren't spray painting or just hanging out? I mean, how many normal people are just going down there?
well, I mean, I can say I don't have an exact answer to that question, like, in terms of numbers, but, I mean, I can tell you that there were, like, there's, like, people, like, jogging. There's, like, a jogging trail back there, where you can bike and scooter and whatever. It's a paved trail, but there's also, like, a fair number of, um, homeless people back there.
That's where a lot of the big homeless camps have been,
Yeah,
is
it's
back in that area because it's forested, you can kinda get some cover, and then they just aggregate.
one thing I will mention is that JP actually picked up a lot of garbage, and that's how it's one of the ways he actually got by. Um, he actually, um, from what he's told me, he actually helped, save them all to some degree, in terms of I mean, it was kind of, what's the word? They kinda coexisted, him and the mall. He actually, yeah, he picked up, like, tons and tons of garbage, and the mall let him remain behind the mall because he was doing that kind of work. And I'm sure you saw him, like, wheeling around a cart. That cart was not just for his belongings. That was also for garbage bags that he was getting stuff into. Um, and the thing with Dennis Gagnon was that Gagnon was, you know, Gagnon saw the good in JP, as you probably saw through the way JP's, admiration for him. Um, and yeah, it was kind of a coexisting relationship like that. So, it
Well,
was
that
really
was another interesting dynamic in your documentary was when JP's talking about Gagnon and then says that Gagnon gave him that ticket for trash or for recycling or something.
mm,
And he says most people would hear that and probably think that's a bad thing, but that ticket also came with a diversion program through Uplift Eureka that got him into housing.
yes.
And so he was thankful that Gagnon did that, and Gagnon did that for that reason. And it was interesting seeing, oh, the homeless are really thankful for the police in that sense because they're helping out. They're not just shitting on them and moving them around.
Yeah, I mean, the interaction between the homeless community and the police community in not just Eureka, but Arcata is
Dicey.
it's dicey, it's up for debate, but I think yeah, like, to your point, there are that's definitely a thing. I mean, the police aren't all bad. There's
That's what I'm getting at is
yeah.
Gagnon's specific relationship with JP was really interesting to see because he didn't need to care. He could have just turned a blind eye like most people do, but he seemed bent on actually helping him.
Yeah, and that was one of the things he did say in the documentary was like, "I don't have to help anyone,
Yeah.
but when it comes to JP, blah, blah, blah." And, yeah, no, I really respect Gagnon for his efforts to help JP and, you know, despite everything, it's just it was harmonious, it was beautiful. Yeah.
Now, one of the complaints that you hear around the homeless is that there are a lot of resources. It's just that they're not willing to take advantage of them. Did that seem to hold true while you were doing this?
Um, that's a great question. I I think that the resources were I mean, I think that that's something that I was going to explore more in well, I should preface this by saying this. Um, we were I we were in there was an episode 4 in the making. You may not know that. There was an episode 4 in the making about solutions to homelessness and the resources available to homeless people in this community. While that hasn't gotten finished due to budget shortfalls, I'd love to pick it up sometime, but um, it's I would say that it's kind of a mixed bag. I think that there are certainly people who use the services. One thing I did hear actually from I think it was from a cab driver around here, or I heard it from someone, is that the what was it, the rescue mission actually I from what I've been told, forces you to participate in their religious services, and if you're not religious, you get kinda, like, less you kinda get at the short end of the stick when it comes to availability of whatever. So I find that interesting, but, yeah, I don't have, like, a concrete answer to that question, but what I can say is that from the information I have gathered and from what I've seen talking to people, it's kinda all over the place. So, yeah,
Yeah, I'm not sure the extent that resources are withheld with the Eureka Rescue Mission. I had Brian All on, who's the director for that,
you did.
and I know that he is. I believe it's their discipleship program.
Mhm.
It's like a pathway for them to get off the streets type thing,
Mm,
and he seems pretty proud of that, but uses religion in the sense that you need that foundation to try to pull yourself out and pull out of it,
mm.
which some people admittedly don't subscribe to. They think, oh, just let them do their things. But you have to admit there could be value in that. If somebody's floating in the wind and then you give them this thing to kind of guide them, like a life raft in a sense of, oh, you can cling to this and then pull yourself out.
Yeah, for sure, and that was something that we did ask JP. I don't think it made it into the final cut of his first episode or even second episode was the idea of religion. Um, it certainly made it into the Angela William episode. I don't know if you've seen the Angela William.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll get to that obviously, but, yeah, so religion, I would say does yes, I would agree with that sentiment that yes, religion does certainly factor into some people's lives, but again, not every person's life is going to be you
Well
know,
suited.
you're well suited or bound to the concept of religion. But, for those who do benefit from that, more power to them. And I think it's great that they are benefiting from that, and I just, keep at it. But, yeah, that would be my answer.
I I believe AA is structured in that same way, isn't it? With a religious bent? Yeah.
Mm,
It's weird how or not weird, but it's interesting how a lot of those programs have some religious tie
mm,
where, yeah, we're gonna help you, but here's the program we're gonna work through
yeah,
that's tied to the big guy.
right. Yeah, I mean, that's not something I've really considered outside of this conversation and a few other conversations, but yeah, I mean, that would certainly be something that actually, that is something I have looked into a little bit because for my 4th episode, I was I was talking to a fellow named Mark Delaney. If you don't know Mark Delaney, you'll know now who he is. He is a, local, like, I guess, entrepreneur. His son runs Stream Guys, which
Why do I
is
know that Dream Guys?
it's based out of the White Schoolhouse in Bayside. They do, like, all sorts of streaming stuff. They're pretty well no, they're at least in terms of, the media community, but, his son actually runs Stream Guys, and, that being said, he did tell me that, I guess a lot of religious organizations around here, like, shun I don't know if that's the right word. I would need to go back and look at the footage again because, like I said, it's been a minute since I've really touched that footage or gone around to it, but he did so I have talked I there's been mention of, like, the clashing of religion and the homeless community around here. But yeah, I think the word would be shunned. Don't quote me on that, but I think the word would be shunned in terms of like how the religious community treats their homeless individuals or who, they are like, versus like others or whatever. But yeah, so yeah, it's an to make a long story short, it's an interesting topic. I would just need to look into it more. And these questions are great. This is yeah.
and so episode 3, which we haven't talked about,
Yeah.
is with Angela and her husband.
Mm.
Where did that one come from? Did you just you wanted to keep this as a series of some sort, or did you wanna do episode 3 and then finish up with the unfinished episode 4 of how do you solve this problem?
Well, episode 3 actually came from Craigslist. That was the one that
That was the
came
Craigslist
that
one.
was the Craigslist one. And
Were you hesitant when you got a reply from Craigslist about this? You're like,
um
"Maybe we should not respond."
well, I've kind of been I don't know, it's this weird thing with Craigslist, like, just for me yeah, sure, I've gotten shady responses off Craigslist and bots and scammers or whatever, I mean, that's always gonna be the thing with Craigslist or people who have other intentions other than what you are wanting.
Yeah, what is it, the personal section or something?
Yeah. Um,
Yeah, you're like, "I don't need to go in there."
yeah, but, yeah, so we found them through Craigslist, I made a post on Craigslist, and I did get some comments basically telling me to F off, but, as or I was being insensitive or, like, I should post this in the housing section or something or, whatever, but, the response I did get that we did end up going with, which was from Angela and William, and they said, "Hey, we've been living out of our truck for a number of years. We're both disabled. Here's my number. Here's my husband's number. Give me a call. Give him a call. Whatever. We'd love to chat." And that's how we met with them. And so that was, I would say, I don't know if I want to say that's my favorite episode. I think each episode is special in its own right, but that was definitely the episode that I feel the most proud of in terms of how it was structured or just how it all went down. Because the thing with the thing with JP's episode was, as you may recall, in episode 2, we lost contact with him for a few months. Um, not to any of no, I'm not faulting anyone. It's just but unfortunately we weren't able to continue production we production had to be halted for a few months. With Angela William, it was a constant flow of things. And again, I'm not trying to come off as like, insensitive or whatever, but to JP circumstances. But Angela Williams episode, I guess I'll leave it at this. Like I said, each episode is special in its own right. And for Angela Williams episode, I really felt as though it's just their episode was just it was just heartbreaking because as you like you said, you saw episode 3, they were going through it, man. I mean, they had already, physical limitations due to, unforeseen circumstances, but combine that with the fact that they couldn't recline the seats in their truck because there was so much stuff in their truck. I mean, that's insane. That's insane.
Well, it's insane, and then you see their storage unit, and it's just jam-packed with stuff too, and it's like, what are we doing here?" It felt a little pack ratty. Not to be insensitive to what they're going through, but
And I have heard that comment
there was
as
a lot of
there
stuff.
was a lot of stuff, and I've been told one of the comments I've been told before is that they are, they're hoarders. Um, but I think that is something that may be due to, um, it could be mental illness, it could be sentimentalness, it could be this and that. But like I said, we were just really there to just capture what was going on. But I do fully recognize and take in the I don't know if you want to call it criticism or feedback or just a note about how, yeah, they did have a lot of stuff. But it's just, this it's just a constant, like, it's a constant battle, it's a constant fight, it's a constant debate as well about, like, how should we best approach this ever-growing, seemingly bottomless pit, like, issue in the form of homelessness, and housing insecurity. Uh, and it's just, yeah, like I said, it just feels like a bottomless pit sometimes because it's just like, will we ever get one will we ever get, like, a really good solution? Because I mean, something that's been mentioned before is, I don't know if you know, but Finland has pretty much eradicated, I think it's Finland, pretty much eradicated homelessness, um, or that have gotten a lot of unhoused people off the streets, and into housing. And again, this is something that I was going to be exploring more in episode 4, was that, just, like, how, like, what solutions are out there versus, like, what isn't being done versus, the debate in and of itself, maybe at a political or non-political level. Um, and so, yeah, it's kinda all over the place. I mean, that's kinda been like a recurring theme throughout this conversation, right? It's like there's a lot of things that are just all over the place, and it's just, it's kind of a crapshoot.
I'm not familiar with Finland's stance, but I have heard of other countries where it's almost a forced housing. That if
Mm.
you're living on the street, they'll just roll up, pick you up, try to help you get clean. Whereas we try to take a more hands-off approach and let them come to the resources if they want them.
Yeah, so the thing with, this community is, in California, I think it's a nationwide thing, it could simply be California. Anyway, I know, at least as far as this community goes, we have what is called a housing first model, and the housing first model, so there's 2 models as far as I understand, for homelessness or for approaching homelessness. There's the housing first model, which basically states exactly what it sounds like. We're just gonna house everyone, and we're gonna worry about their eligibility for social services later. We're not gonna ask questions, no questions asked. The other model is called the continuum of care model, which says, okay, we are going to actually, like, vet people or vet people, for, like, if they are actually qualified to be enrolled in social services. Or the other thing they could do is they could make, the housing that they get into contingent on social services, or their willingness to participate in social services. So those are the 2 models, but this county does take a housing first approach, and, housing first is debatable, it is. Um, but the main issue with this county is that there's not, and you'll probably hear this from other people as well, is that there's not enough housing available. There's not enough units. The number of people who need housing outpaces the number of units actually available, and so that makes for a big, housing insecurity or houselessness crisis. But, you may recall in Andrew Williams' episode, they are in, Section 8 housing, which is for low-income people. So, yeah, I mean, good for them. They got into housing, but, I am I am aware that there are certainly people out there who are not as fortunate as Angela William or JP. There's definitely untold stories out there, and there's people who need help, and there will always be people who need help. And one of the reasons I wanted to do this documentary was that I wanted to do a public service. I wanted to illuminate their stories. I wanted to get their stories. I wanted to give them a platform for their stories to be shared upon, so that it can benefit the greater community, Humboldt community, California community, worldwide community, however you want to phrase it.
Another interesting dynamic in Angela's episode was the debt that they had accumulated.
Mhm.
Did she go into greater detail with you about what that actually looked like? So for people that don't know, I believe it was just her, but it might have been her and her husband. They were struck on a motorcycle.
It was just her.
It was just her, but she
Yes.
was with another person on the motorcycle.
I believe so. All I know is I know she certainly was on the motorcycle and she sustained severe head trauma, and that was what caused uh, her brain damage,
And it
and
was by a not a fire truck, but a truck belonging to the fire department, like a pickup truck
I
that
believe so,
struck
or
her.
yeah, something like that, and so, like she said, the fire department has to pay her till the day she dies or something like the city
Yeah,
of
she got a
Ukiah.
settlement. Yeah,
Yeah,
from the city of Ukiah.
yeah. Um,
But it sounded like they had accumulated a lot of debt, and that was another barrier in that they couldn't get out from under that based off what they were bringing in.
yeah, so she didn't exactly go into the greatest amount of detail with us about it, but, I mean, given everything, we rolled with it, we believed her, and we still do to this day, that, she's not, um, BSing us, and, she, what I can tell you is that her debt did come from, the credit cards. That was something that they did mention, credit cards constantly having to put money into their truck, putting money into their food, their clothing, other various things, and so that certainly factored in, but no, she did not go into a lot of or as much detail as we necessarily wanted about her debt.
That scares the shit out of me.
It
Andy
does.
and I were talking about that before we started the podcast.
Mm,
I know people that have 7 or 8 credit cards, and I hear that and I start sweating because I get nervous.
mm,
The idea that it's so easy to just use fake money and pay and buy things, and then all of a sudden you have to pay the piper, and it's like, "Oh, well, you have to pay, and then you have 26% interest, and then now your payment is higher, and it starts adding up, and then you get to this point where it's not even the product that you bought, you're paying off interest on what you bought, and then
yeah,
you get buried."
yeah, it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy, and, yeah, like, talk about feeling like it's a bottomless pit. I mean, going back to that phrase, it's just like, wow, it's scary, but it's unbelievable, and it's heartbreaking, it is, and like you said, like, yeah, your palms are sweaty mom spaghetti or whatever, but,
Shout out to Eminem, we're going
shout out to Eminem, I don't know if that's like, well,
I
maybe a
didn't
little
say the
gay.
spaghetti part, but I like that addition.
Okay. Sorry, just trying to add a little humor into this, but, yeah, so, yeah, that would be, yeah, that would be my answer to the debt question.
That I could see that being a point of contention in the sense that people would then try to attribute some fault to her, that, "Oh, they're kind of in this situation because of poor money management or the consumerism that plagues so many people."
Right, but then there's, like, so many other things, like, oh, I mean, so many other factors at play. I mean, I mean, we never directly ask them about if they're going through anything, well, not if they're going through anything mentally, but if they're directly dealing with any mental, illness or whatever.
But, I
Um,
mean, she said, at least in the documentary, that the doctors thought she would never walk or talk again,
right.
which is that's pretty crazy.
Yeah, it is really crazy, and, yeah, but here she's walking, granted, she does have a bit of a limp, but she yeah, I mean, she's still at it, and she and William are bonded through love and, their lightheartedness for one another, their lighthearted approach to life, and that's how they're getting through it. I mean, you probably saw that throughout the documentary. They were always joking with one another, they were always trying to make things better than they actually were, and that's what broke my heart, and that's about that 3rd episode. So, yeah.
How much money did you dump into this?
How much money did we dump into this? I don't know an exact amount. I would need to look back at the budget spreadsheet. We did budget. But it was probably, I mean, collectively, probably at least several $100s, if not more, and maybe in the thousands, I don't know, out of pocket. We did get donations. We did have a GoFundMe going, and we still have a GoFundMe. It's been kind of a dud for a while. I don't know if this is if I'm allowed to
Oh,
say,
yeah, yeah, if you wanna plug it right now.
yeah, that we do have a GoFundMe, and I can link you the GoFundMe, as well as, other links. I'll send you a bunch of links following this conversation, and, yeah, we still have a GoFundMe. I mean, ultimately, I would like to still continue this project, but as of right now, everybody else is either, you know, dropped out of the frame altogether due to, work getting in the way, life getting in the way, or the interest has been lowered. However, I am still very much interested. I mean, it's just yeah, I'd love to pick it up again. I mean, I mean, as you saw, I mean, it was the content that we came out with was really cool and was also really, I think, impactful for a lot of people. We have hosted screenings at the Minor Theater, at Synapsis and Eureka. I have been contacted about doing a screening at the Sanctuary in Arcata. I would love to make that happen, but if and when that happens, I don't know if you guys would be able to get the word out there about that. But yeah, so I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, this is I really, man, I've really gone back and forth about, okay, is this just like a drop in the bucket thing, or is this like, is this actually like something that's, not only changing people's lives, but is actually like making waves in the community, um, making rounds and waves in the community, and I think the latter. I think the latter. I wanna believe the latter. It's just, I think more people need to know about this, and this is why I'm appreciative of coming on the air and talking with you about this is because, I think the more people know about this work, not only this is not necessarily for really profit or just, like, bragging rights or even resume building. This is something that truly means something to me. This is something that I really want to make a change with. So, yeah.
Is this an avenue that you wanna pursue? Directing?
I am not sure yet. I am still trying to figure out what I wanna do with my life, as many post-college recently removed college graduates want or going through. So, but yeah, it'd be cool. I mean, if I could make a living out of this, that'd be amazing. Or if I can continue to follow this, I mean, I at least would love to continue episode 4. And so if there's anyone out there that would like to contribute to episode 4, either monetarily, if that's the if I'm allowed to say that,
Yeah.
or like being crew or whatever, send them my way. I mean, I would love to pick it up. I mean, right now I'm just working on like video editing gigs in Arcata and just doing things here and there and kind of just like taking it easy. But I mean, if this is something that can be picked up again, so I'm all for it.
What's the holdup for episode 4? Is it time recording more footage? Is it editing footage?
Well, like I said, it's like budget shortfalls right now.
But in terms of what? In terms of needing new equipment or budget in terms of
Like, I mean, at some point, and I don't know how else to say this, is like we had gone so long without asking for donations really, or we had been doing a lot of this out of pocket, but at the end of the day, n this can only be a passion project for so long and would need to turn into something that I would admittedly need to make some kind of money from, or I don't know how else to say it, profit, whatever. So, um, I mean, it's cool to work on it. It's just not something that is a big priority in my life right now due to what I just mentioned. So I don't know if that makes sense.
yeah, it's feedback in a monetary sense
Mhm.
that is missing for you right now.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Time. Time is a huge thing.
Time is a huge thing. Yeah. I can say that we put hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours into this documentary. We were going out several times a week filming with people. Um, and yeah, like I said, we didn't really ask for money. We just kind of did it ourselves because we wanted to do it and it meant something to us. And if it can make a greater change in this world, then that's at the end of the day, that's what matters to us, money or not. So, yeah.
Okay, well, Gabe, I appreciate you coming on and talking about this, man.
Yeah, no problem.
I'm excited to see maybe if episode 4 comes out in the future.
Yeah. And again, like I said, if there's anyone out there who would like to help in any kind of way, send them my way. I would really I like I said, I'm kind of at a crossroads in my life, and if this can help propel me forward, then that'd be amazing. I'd love to pick up episode 4. We have a lot of footage with it, and it just needs a little more fine tuning and maybe some additional assist hands on deck. But yeah, that's kind of it.
Do you wanna plug where people can find you, where they can find Homeless and Humboldt, where they can donate if they wanna do that?
Sure, sure. So if you search homeless and Humboldt on YouTube, you can find it's pretty much, I think, one of the first search queries, if not the first search query, our channel along with all 3 episodes. There's also trailers for all 3 episodes. Um, I will say something that was a little deflating for going back to an earlier question you had about why it hasn't been continuing episode 4, is that we also got denied a grant. We had applied for a grant, through, Humboldt Area Foundation, and that got denied, unfortunately, but, that was a little deflating, um, and that kinda didn't exactly kill my confidence, but it definitely lowered it, but yes, like you said, feedback monetarily would be nice, but also the GoFundMe, if you search GoFundMe homeless in Humboldt, you can find the GoFundMe. I will also send you the link. We are we have a goal, but we could expand that goal. The money there for those who do go onto the GoFundMe, they will see that there has been a significant amount of money donated. That went into the first 3 episodes. That's not the money that's gone into the 4th episode. We have gotten 0 money for the 4th episode. That has just been all out of pocket, really, and, yeah. So, also, if you search homeless I mean, if you just search homeless and Humble, you can find all the links. I should probably create one of those things called a link tree. I'm learning about that. Um, and, I mean, if you search homeless and Humboldt on, Instagram, just literally homeless and Humboldt, you can find our page where we had been posting. It would be cool to start posting again if we do get some kind of traction again. And I'm sure I'm missing some homelessandhumboldt.wordpress.com. That also has a that's like the main hub for a lot of our things. And again, I'll link you that site.
Yeah, we'll put it in the, description so
Okay,
people can find it.
for sure.
I think I wanna end it on this because I would be remiss if I didn't say this. I think you should go ahead and do the 4th episode. I get the time constraint, and it's hard doing something when you're not getting any money for it and you're just dedicating your time and it feels like a slog. But sometimes that comes first and then the money starts to follow. It's
Absolutely.
just breaking through that barrier of, do I really want to spend all my time doing this thing and then have the possibility of nothing coming from it? But
Right.
sometimes those are the best things, is it pays off on the back half. You just got to get to the back half, you
Mm.
know. But take that with a grain of salt. I mean, we're in a garage filming a podcast, so. All right, Gabe, I appreciate you, man. Thank you.
Thank you so much.